At the glittering Christmas gala, the man who owned the city, Daniel Carter, looked down at his wife and sneered in front of everyone. But Alicia Monroe-Carter had been planning her quiet, devastating revenge for months. That night, he thought he humiliated her, only to discover he had underestimated the woman who held the real power all along. Welcome to Mr. Roberts Stories. If you love gripping tales of love, betrayal, revenge, and shocking twists, you've just found your new home. Here, every story will pull you in, make your heart race, and leave you guessing until the very last word. Now, here's the deal. Watch till the end because the best surprises are always saved for last. And if you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss another unforgettable story. Every story on Mr. Roberts Stories isn't just something you watch. It's something you feel, something that stays with you long after the video ends. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. Trust me, you're going to want to watch every second. This is Mr. Roberts Stories, where every story is an experience. The twinkling lights of Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds against the winter sky, each star-like bulb reflected in the towering glass of the Carter residence. At the very top of the building, inside a penthouse that was the envy of New York's elite, preparations for the Christmas Eve gala were already in motion. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved gracefully across the room, setting down crystal glasses, aligning silverware, and adjusting the last touches of poinsettia centerpieces on the long banquet tables. Tonight was not just another holiday celebration. For Daniel Carter, the night symbolized power, prestige, and success. It was the 10th consecutive Christmas Eve gala he had hosted since founding his real estate empire. And more importantly, it was the 10th anniversary of his marriage to Alicia Monroe-Carter. Daniel, tall and broad-shouldered with sandy blonde hair slicked back, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the skyline. He was the picture of confidence in his tailored navy tuxedo, the fabric catching the golden glow of chandeliers above him. In his world, appearances mattered. The right suit, the right guests, the right champagne, all of it carefully orchestrated to remind everyone in attendance that Daniel Carter was untouchable. Behind him, Alicia moved with quiet grace, checking on the finishing details. Her dark skin shimmered beneath the soft shimmer of her emerald gown, the color making her look like royalty against the snowy backdrop outside. Alicia had always been elegance personified. Unlike the other wives in Daniel's circle, she had never needed to flaunt her worth with jewels or designer labels. Her beauty was timeless, her poise disarming, and her intellect sharp enough to silence any room she entered. But tonight, she wasn't simply playing hostess. Hidden in the silver clutch she carried was a single envelope, slim and unassuming, yet carrying the weight of her heart. She had rehearsed the moment in her mind for weeks, the look on Daniel's face when she gave it to him, the joy they would share, the new chapter it would begin. For Alicia, this Christmas Eve was supposed to be unforgettable. "Are you ready?" Daniel's voice broke her thoughts. He didn't look at her when he spoke. His eyes were still fixed on the skyline. "As ready as I'll ever be," Alicia replied, forcing a smile. He finally turned, his blue eyes scanning her up and down with a hint of approval. "You look presentable. That dress is a good choice." The compliment landed with the weight of a stone. Once upon a time, Daniel's eyes had lit up when he saw her. He used to tell her she was breathtaking, his miracle, his muse. Now the words felt mechanical, perfunctory, as though she were simply another accessory to his empire. Guests began to arrive shortly after 8. The room filled with the hum of polite laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the quiet negotiations of men and women who lived for influence. Daniel moved through the crowd like a king among subjects, shaking hands, trading jokes, promising deals. Alicia trailed behind him, smiling warmly, engaging in soft conversations, but always slightly in his shadow. "Daniel, this acquisition is going to be your crown jewel," one investor praised, clapping him on the back. "Of course," Daniel replied with a dazzling smile. "It's a vision only I could bring to life. Timing, strategy, execution. It's all about knowing when to strike." As the group laughed, Alicia gently interjected, her voice calm but thoughtful. "Actually, I was reading a study the other day about sustainable housing in urban areas. If Daniel's company incorporated some of those strategies into this acquisition, it could not only increase long-term profits but also set a precedent for ethical real estate development." The room went silent for a beat. The investor raised his eyebrows, clearly intrigued. "That's actually a fascinating point." But Daniel's jaw tightened. His smile faltered. He let out a cold laugh, his voice cutting across the table. "Alicia, please, don't embarrass yourself. This is serious business, not one of your little lectures at the university. You sound naive." The word hung in the air like a blade. Guests exchanged awkward glances, some sipping their champagne to hide their discomfort. Alicia felt her heart twist, but she refused to let the pain show. Her pride, her dignity, those were hers alone, and no man, not even her husband, could strip them away in public. She straightened her shoulders, her emerald gown shimmering as though it drew strength from her resolve. With a faint smile that betrayed nothing of her heartbreak, she reached into her clutch. The envelope was smooth beneath her fingers, the paper cold against her palm. "Naive?" she repeated softly, her voice steady. Before Daniel could respond, she stepped forward and slapped the envelope squarely against his chest. The sharp sound echoed through the hall, silencing the crowd. Daniel froze, his hand instinctively closing around the envelope. "What the hell is this?" he hissed under his breath. Alicia looked him straight in the eye, her expression unreadable. "The biggest surprise of your life. Merry Christmas, Daniel." Without another word, she turned and walked toward the grand doors. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step deliberate, graceful, final. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, whispers following in her wake. By the time the doors closed behind her, the ballroom was a storm of murmurs. Daniel stood rooted in place, the envelope burning like fire in his hand. His face was pale, his confidence fractured. The guests tried to mask their curiosity, but all eyes were on him. He slipped the envelope into his jacket pocket, forcing a tight smile as though nothing had happened. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his glass, his voice smooth but strained. "Let's continue the celebration." But the laughter was forced, the music no longer as sweet, and Daniel Carter, for the first time in his charmed life, felt the walls closing in. Because deep down, he knew Alicia Monroe-Carter had never been a woman who acted without purpose. And whatever was inside that envelope would not just be a Christmas surprise. It would be a reckoning. The gala stretched on long after Alicia had left, but the spirit of celebration had evaporated into thin air. Guests still clinked glasses, still made polite small talk, but the spark was gone. Attention hummed in the air, a silent question whispered across the ballroom. What did she give him? Daniel Carter wore his smile like a mask, shaking hands, cracking shallow jokes, trying desperately to project the image of a man in control. But his hand kept brushing against the envelope tucked inside his jacket pocket, as if it were a live wire. He had not dared open it in front of anyone. To do so would have been to admit that Alicia, his wife, the woman he had just belittled, held the power to shake him publicly. No, he would wait. He would find out in private, where no one could see if the contents cut him to the bone. By midnight the party was over. The last guest left with a lingering glance at Daniel's stiff expression, and the staff began clearing tables. Alone in his penthouse, Daniel finally let the mask drop. He loosened his bow tie, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and pulled the envelope from his jacket with trembling fingers. It was plain, unmarked, but the way Alicia had handed it to him made it feel like a bomb waiting to detonate. He tore it open. Inside were several documents neatly stacked. At first glance, they looked like contracts, the sort he handled daily in his empire of high-rises and billion-dollar deals. But as he flipped through them, his stomach dropped. Stock transfers. Legal agreements. Signatures. Daniel sank into a leather chair, his glass forgotten on the table. The documents were crystal clear. Alicia had quietly acquired a stake in his company, a controlling stake. Through shell corporations, subtle purchases, and clever maneuvering, she had built herself into a majority shareholder. It wasn't just a financial move. It was a declaration of power. And then, at the very bottom of the stack, was a handwritten note in Alicia's elegant script. For 10 years I stood by your side while you built your empire. What you never realized is that I was building one too. Merry Christmas, Daniel. Consider this your reminder. Respect is not optional in a marriage. And love without respect is nothing at all. Daniel's chest tightened. He reread the note, his hands trembling, his pride bruised beyond repair. Alicia wasn't just walking out in anger, she was walking out with the very foundation of his empire in her hands. The man who had laughed at her, who had called her naive in front of his investors, had been outmaneuvered by the very woman he underestimated. The next morning the fallout began. Calls poured in from board members and business partners. Rumors spread like wildfire. Alicia had left the party, Alicia had given him something, Alicia had leverage. In Manhattan's high society, whispers carried more weight than facts. And the whispers painted Daniel not as a mogul in control, but as a man on the edge of losing everything. Daniel, his CFO barked over the phone, Is it true? Does Alicia have shares we don't know about? Daniel's jaw tightened. It's under control. Under control? The man snapped. If she has even half of what I've heard, then she has influence over the company's direction. Investors are nervous. They don't want drama, they want stability. Daniel hung up without answering. He couldn't admit it. Not yet. Meanwhile, across the city, Alicia sat in a quiet cafe, sipping tea as snow fell outside the frosted window. She looked serene, almost peaceful. Her phone buzzed constantly, Daniel's calls, Daniel's texts, but she didn't answer. For years she had sacrificed herself for him. Her career, her time, her voice. She had been the supportive wife, the silent partner, the elegant arm candy at gala after gala. But she had also been watching, learning, investing. While Daniel built towers of glass and steel, Alicia built foundations of her own. She wasn't out to destroy him, not yet. She was out to remind him that respect was not negotiable. And if humiliation was the only language he understood, then she would speak it fluently. By the third day, Daniel's control began to unravel further. At a board meeting, one of his senior partners slid a document across the table. Alicia's name is listed here, the partner said carefully, as majority shareholder. Daniel's eyes narrowed. She's my wife. That doesn't make her your puppet, came the sharp reply. If she chooses to exercise her voting rights, she could outvote you. She could redirect projects, veto deals, even change leadership if she wanted to. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. She wouldn't dare. But the truth was, Daniel wasn't sure anymore. That evening he finally confronted her. He found Alicia in her office at Columbia University, where she taught courses on African American literature and history. She looked up from a stack of papers as he entered, her calm gaze steady against the storm brewing in his. You've humiliated me, Daniel said without preamble. No, Alicia replied softly. You did that yourself. He stepped closer, his voice low, furious. What do you think you're doing, Alicia? Do you think you can just walk away and take my company with you? Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. Your company? Daniel, I've been investing in it for years. Quietly. Smartly. I believed in it when no one else did, when you were nothing but a man with skyscraper dreams and ramen noodle dinners. I didn't take it from you, I built it with you. Daniel's throat tightened, but his pride would not let him yield. You blindsided me. You made me look weak. You made yourself look weak, Alicia said firmly, standing now. She was smaller than him, but in that moment she seemed taller. You disrespected me in front of a room full of strangers. You called me naive. And yet, I'm the one who saw farther than you ever did. Silence stretched between them, thick with years of unspoken resentment. Finally, Alicia picked up her bag. This isn't about revenge, Daniel. It's about dignity. What? And if you ever thought I'd let you strip that from me without consequence, then you never knew me at all. She brushed past him, her perfume lingering in the air long after she was gone. Daniel remained frozen, fists clenched, his empire suddenly feeling like sand slipping through his fingers. Back at the penthouse that night, he poured himself another glass of whiskey, staring out at the glittering skyline. For the first time in his life, Daniel Carter, the man who built towers high enough to scrape the heavens, realized he was standing on fragile ground. Because Alicia Monroe-Carter wasn't just his wife. She was his equal. And she had just proven she could bring his empire crashing down with a single envelope. And deep inside, a terrifying thought gnawed at him. What if that envelope was only the beginning? The city that once sparkled for Daniel Carter suddenly felt hostile. Manhattan's skyline had always been his pride, glass towers reaching into the heavens, monuments to his genius and ambition. Now, every skyscraper seemed to mock him, whispering Alicia's name in the wind that howled between them. For the first time in a decade, Daniel was no longer sure he was in control. The rumors had spread far beyond his company. The Carter marriage scandal, as the tabloids named it, dominated headlines. Paparazzi snapped pictures of him stepping out of his office, his face grim, his tie loosened, the confident smile gone. Business magazines speculated on whether Alicia Monroe-Carter, historian turned majority shareholder, was preparing to dethrone her own husband. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors wanted reassurance. Board members wanted explanations. Lawyers wanted strategies. But the one person Daniel needed to talk to, the one person who could put this fire out, refused to answer his calls. Alicia had gone silent. She had always been quiet by nature, but this was different. She had disappeared into her own world. At Columbia University, she lectured her students as if nothing had changed. She smiled at them, discussed Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, spoke about resilience and identity with the same grace she always had. To outsiders, she was the picture of composure. But behind that calm smile lay a woman who had finally stepped into her power. Every missed call, every ignored message, every unanswered knock on her office door drove Daniel deeper into frustration. He, who had commanded boardrooms and dictated markets, was powerless in the face of his wife's silence. By the end of the week, the board demanded a closed meeting. Daniel entered the room, his stride strong but his face pale. "We need to talk about Alicia," one of the directors began. "She's holding a majority stake. Investors are nervous. We can't operate under the shadow of a family dispute." "This isn't a family dispute," Daniel snapped. The man raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it?" Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to shout, to demand loyalty, but he knew the truth. The company's loyalty was tied to stability and money, and Alicia now held both. When the meeting ended, Daniel didn't linger. He couldn't. For the first time in his career, he felt like the walls of the boardroom were closing in on him. That night, unable to take the silence anymore, he drove to Alicia's brownstone. Snow was falling, coating the steps in a thin white blanket. Her lights were on, warm, golden light spilling through the windows, but she didn't open the door when he knocked. He stood there, shivering in the cold, his pride burning hotter than the whiskey he downed earlier. Finally, after what felt like hours, the door cracked open. Alicia stood there in a soft sweater, her curls loose around her shoulders, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I need to talk to you," Daniel replied. His voice cracked despite his best effort to sound strong. For a long moment she just looked at him. Then she stepped aside, letting him in. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and fresh tea. It was warm, lived in, so different from their cold, cavernous penthouse. Books lined the walls, photographs of Alicia's family adorned the shelves. This was her world, not his. He sank onto her sofa, running a hand through his hair. "You've destroyed me, Alicia." Her brow arched. "No, Daniel. You did that yourself." "Don't," he said sharply, but there was no strength behind the word. His shoulders sagged. I don't understand. We built this life together. Why would you blindside me like this?" Alicia sat across from him, her eyes steady. "Do you really want to know? Or do you just want me to make you feel better?" He looked at her, then really looked at her. The woman who had once been his anchor, his partner, his love. He had taken her for granted for so long that he barely recognized her strength now. "Tell me," he whispered. And so she did. She told him about the late nights she had spent alone while he chased deals across the globe. About the dinners she had cooked that went cold on the table. About the time she had defended him to his mother, to the press, even to herself. She told him about how she had invested in his company, not out of greed but out of faith. She had believed in him when no one else did, buying shares quietly, steadily, never once thinking she'd need them for herself. "But then," she said softly, "you stopped seeing me. I became an accessory, a name on your arm at galas, a shadow in your photographs. You didn't listen when I spoke. You didn't see me when I stood beside you. And on the night of our anniversary, you humiliated me in front of a room full of people who already doubted me." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "I wasn't naive, Daniel. I was patient. And patience runs out." Daniel's chest ached as her words sliced through him. He remembered those dinners, those late nights, those times she had looked at him with love in her eyes while he checked his phone for emails. He remembered brushing off her dreams, her lectures, her research because they didn't add commas to his bank account. He had built towers of steel, but he had neglected the one thing that mattered most, the woman who had believed in him when he had nothing. For the first time in his life, Daniel Carter felt truly small. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, Alicia stood. "You should go," she said softly. "I've said what I needed to say." He rose slowly, staring at her, wanting to beg, to drop to his knees, to tell her he was sorry. But his pride held him back. His voice came out hoarse. "Is this it? Is this how it ends?" Her eyes softened, but her tone was firm. "This isn't about endings, Daniel. This is about consequences." And with that she opened the door. The cold air rushed in, stinging his skin as he stepped back into the night. Snowflakes melted on his suit as he walked to his car, the weight of her words crushing him. Back in his penthouse, Daniel stood by the window, staring at the city that had once felt like his kingdom. For the first time the skyline didn't gleam, it loomed. Alicia's silence was louder than any boardroom debate, any investor's concern. She wasn't just walking away. She was teaching him a lesson he had never wanted to learn. Power without respect was fragile. And deep down, Daniel knew, this was only the beginning of his reckoning. The winter wind rattled the windows of Daniel Carter's penthouse, as if the city itself sensed the storm brewing inside. 4 days he had lived under a cloud of uncertainty. Every call unanswered, every message ignored, every whisper from the boardroom reminded him that the woman he loved, and underestimated, was quietly in control. Alicia Monroe-Carter had disappeared from public view, leaving only traces of her presence. The envelope, the board documents, and a sense of undeniable power. And now Daniel knew the moment of reckoning had come. It was another gala, smaller and more private this time, meant to celebrate a charitable cause Alicia had championed for years. The room was elegant, warm, and filled with prominent figures from both Daniel's and Alicia's circles. But tonight, it was Alicia who commanded attention. She stepped onto the raised platform, her emerald gown gleaming under the chandelier lights. The crowd fell silent immediately. Unlike Daniel, who had always relied on spectacle, Alicia's presence radiated quiet authority. Every eye followed her as she approached the microphone. Daniel stood at the edge of the room, his chest tight, hands clenched at his sides. He had come because he couldn't stay away, because part of him still believed in the woman who had been his partner for 10 years. And now he had to face the truth. She was no longer the woman who waited silently in his shadow. Alicia's voice carried clearly, confidently. Thank you all for being here tonight. Many of you know me as a historian, a professor, or Daniel Carter's wife. But tonight, I stand before you not as someone defined by titles, but as a woman who has learned the value of her own voice and choices. A murmur ran through the room. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. She continued. For the past 10 years, I have supported Daniel in building his empire. I have stood by him through victories and setbacks, offered advice, comfort, and partnership. But there came a point when respect, patience, and love were tested. And when they were met with disregard, I realized that true power lies not in waiting for someone to notice your worth, but in claiming it for yourself. She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. Daniel's throat went dry. He could feel every person in the room shifting, sensing the magnitude of what was about to unfold. And so, Alicia said, lifting a small stack of papers, I took measures to secure my place not just in this marriage but in the world I helped build. These documents, already known to the board, affirm my position as a majority shareholder in Carter Properties. Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel's hand went to his forehead. His empire, his pride, his identity, all now partially in her hands. But tonight, she said, lowering the papers and looking directly at him, I am revealing the full truth. She reached into her clutch and pulled out another envelope, identical to the one from the Christmas gala. The crowd leaned in. Daniel's eyes widened. This, she said, contains a revelation about our future. About what comes next and the choice I am giving Daniel, and by extension myself. She paused again, holding his gaze. Daniel's knees felt weak. The suspense, the waiting, the weeks of silent tension. It all came crashing down into a single moment. Alicia opened the envelope. The room remained hushed. Inside were two things. A notarized document confirming that Daniel could no longer make unilateral business decisions without her consent, and a letter revealing she was carrying their first child. Daniel staggered backward. His face drained of color. For a moment he couldn't speak. The crowd, sensing something monumental, held its collective breath. Alicia's voice softened. Daniel, I'm not leaving you. I'm not taking vengeance. I'm giving you the opportunity to rise to the man I know you can be. Respect me, honor me, and love me, and we can face this future together. But if you cannot, if you continue to belittle, dismiss, or underestimate me, then this child and I will chart a course that ensures our safety, our dignity, and our independence. The weight of her words pressed against Daniel's chest like a physical force. Every decision he had ever made, every insult, every dismissal, he saw them now in stark, unforgiving light. He found his voice, hoarse and broken. Alicia. I don't know what to say. Say what you've always known in your heart, she replied. That love without respect is hollow. That a marriage is not just about titles, money, or appearances. It is about partnership. And if you truly want this family, you must prove that you are worthy of it. Daniel's knees gave way and he sank to the floor, staring at the envelope, at the documents, at the life he had taken for granted. The room remained silent, waiting, witnessing. He felt a sob rising in his chest, a release of the pride and arrogance that had blinded him for too long. Alicia, he choked out, I have been a fool. I didn't see you, not really. I thought love alone was enough. But it's not. You're brilliant, capable, stronger than I ever imagined. I will not fail you again. Tears glistened in Alicia's eyes. She stepped forward, kneeling to meet him at eye level. Then show me, Daniel. Actions speak louder than words. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the silence stretching and binding them together. The weight of the past, the mistakes, the misunderstandings, they were all suspended in that breath. Then Daniel took her hand. I will be the husband you deserve. The father our child deserves. I promise you that. Alicia's lips curved into a small, triumphant smile, one of both victory and forgiveness. Then let us begin again, she whispered. In the days that followed, the city began to see a new Daniel Carter. One humbled by love, awakened by respect, and guided by the brilliance of the woman who had taught him the true meaning of partnership. Board meetings became collaborative rather than autocratic. Investments were discussed, debated, and shared. The empire remained strong, but now it was fortified by equality, trust, and shared vision. And in the quiet moments, when the city lights reflected on the snow-covered streets below, Daniel and Alicia would sit together, hands entwined, dreaming of the future. One where pride no longer ruled and love was tempered with respect. Their first child, growing quietly in Alicia's womb, became a symbol of the life they would now build together. A life defined not by control or appearances, but by mutual admiration, trust, and unshakable partnership. The envelope, once a weapon, had become the key. Alicia had not only claimed her power, she had shown Daniel what it truly meant to love and be loved. And for the first time in 10 years, Daniel Carter understood that the most valuable empire in the world was not built with steel or money, it was built with heart, respect, and unwavering loyalty. Winter had melted into spring, and the city that once seemed so vast and intimidating now shimmered with promise. Daniel Carter stood on the balcony of their penthouse, the early morning sun painting the skyline in gold and rose hues. He inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air, and for the first time in years felt truly at peace. Behind him, Alicia entered the room carrying a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. Their daughter, little Lila, slept soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of innocent dreams. Daniel's heart swelled as he took her into his arms, careful and reverent. She's perfect, he whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. She is, Alicia agreed softly, stepping closer. And so are we. Daniel looked at his wife, the woman who had humbled him, challenged him, and ultimately saved him from the man he had been. She had always been brilliant, resilient, and compassionate, but now he saw something deeper. A strength that could build, protect, and nurture a family against any storm. I promise, Daniel said, his voice steady, I will never take this life, this family, or you for granted again. Alicia smiled, a gentle curve of her lips that radiated warmth. I know you won't, she said, her hand resting lightly on his chest. We've been through the fire, Daniel. And we came out stronger. Their daughter stirred, and Daniel felt a surge of love that transcended every deal, every skyscraper, every accolade he had ever earned. This tiny life, a product of their union, was proof that true wealth was not measured in dollars but in moments, in trust, in love. In the weeks that followed, the Carter empire thrived under their renewed partnership. Board meetings became collaborative, investments were shared decisions, and Daniel found himself relying on Alicia's insight more than ever. She wasn't just his wife, she was his equal, his confidant, his anchor. Friends and colleagues noticed the change. The man who had once been driven solely by ambition now spoke with humility, listening as much as he directed, valuing people over profits, respect over dominance. And everywhere he looked, Alicia's presence reminded him that love paired with respect could move mountains greater than any he had built. One quiet evening, Daniel and Alicia sat on their balcony together, Lila nestled between them. The city lights twinkled below like stars captured in glass. I can't believe how far we've come, Daniel said, his arm around Alicia's shoulders. It wasn't just us, she replied, pressing her cheek to his. It was what we believed in, family, respect, love. That's what carried us through. Daniel kissed her forehead, feeling the warmth of her skin and the life they had created together. I used to think power meant control. I was wrong. Power means protecting what you love, nurturing it, and letting it grow. Alicia smiled, and in her eyes, he saw the reflection of the man he had once been, and the man he had become. And now we have everything, she said softly, because we finally understand each other. The wind whispered through the balcony, carrying with it a promise of countless mornings like this, peaceful, bright, and shared. Daniel held Alicia and their daughter close, the city sprawling endlessly before them, and for the first time he felt complete. No envelope, no boardroom, no threat could ever test them again. They had faced the fire, endured the storm, and emerged stronger, bound not just by marriage, but by partnership, respect, and unwavering love. And as the sun rose over Manhattan, bathing the city in gold, Daniel knew one truth more profound than all the wealth he had ever accumulated. The greatest fortune in life is family, love, and the courage to fight for both.